What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Ole Miss Rebels, a team coming off a pretty good year last year in 2024. They did miss the college football playoff, though. This team was one big play away from actually making the first ever 12-team playoff, but they came up just short. But they still had a 10-win season, a 10-3 year for Ole Miss in 2024. A lot of people were kind of expecting them to make the playoff, but they came up just a little bit short. My thoughts on this team, though, before we get into the prediction for 2025, can Ole Miss make the college football playoff this season? Well, you first look at this offense. I'm not really concerned about the offense whatsoever for Ole Miss. They obviously should be pretty explosive, but they got a lot of new faces on that offense. They're going to have a new quarterback, Austin Simmons, taking over for Jackson Dart. How good is he going to be? Is he going to be good as Jackson Dart was? I really don't know, but I think he'll be pretty solid for them. He's going to get better as the season goes along. And then you look at the wide receiver position. A lot of new faces there gone. Actually a lot of new faces coming up this year, but they lost a lot of good wide receivers from last year. So maybe the receiving position is kind of a concern there for the Ole Miss offense. But this offense, as always, should be able to score some points. Defensively, though, that's where the big concerns come in for Ole Miss. Defensive line, I think, is a little bit of concern. They're going to have some new faces there on the defensive line. They lost some really good players there. Secondary, though, looks to be pretty solid. I don't want to say it's one of the best secondaries in the country, but it's definitely right there as a pretty solid secondary. So let's now get to the schedule for 2025. Here is their schedule for 2025 for the Rebels. Again, Ole Miss last year, they were 10-3 in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Ole Miss team for 2025. And they start things off with Georgia State on August the 30th. Should be a pretty easy win for the Rebels. I wouldn't really say this is going to be like a 70-0 type ball game. I think Georgia State's going to actually be competitive for, a little bit in the first quarter, but then Ole Miss is definitely going to put up some points in this one, and I do expect Ole Miss to take care of business. So I got the Rebels starting off 1-0, and then they actually open up SEC play right away the next weekend, and they go on the road to play Kentucky on September the 6th. Of course, this is a Kentucky team that beat Ole Miss last year. If you go back to last season, Kentucky actually beat Ole Miss on the road in Oxford. Can Ole Miss probably do the same thing and beat Kentucky here in Lexington? Well, Kentucky actually wasn't a really good team last year. Even though they beat Ole Miss, Kentucky ended up not being as good as we thought they were going to be for the rest of the year. And this is a Kentucky team that's got a lot of new faces on this roster. I am concerned about the Kentucky defense because they lost so many guys there on the defensive side of the football. I think this offense actually has a chance to be decent for Kentucky, but I just don't think Kentucky, with their new faces here in week number 2, and then obviously the new faces playing their first SEC game, I think the nerves are going to be there for Kentucky. Even though this is in Lexington, Kentucky definitely has a chance here to pull off probably an early upset in the season, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think Ole Miss is going to come in here really fired up in this one, even though it's on the road. I think they'll probably get revenge on Kentucky, and this is also kind of a battle here between two really good transfer portal classes, and I got to go with Ole Miss's transfer portal class definitely with the advantage. So I think this is a close game. I'm going to go with Ole Miss. Maybe a late turnover probably changes the difference, and I got Ole Miss improving to 2-0. Next, they play Arkansas at home on September 13th, and actually for a fun fact, they're going to be playing 3 SEC teams in the month of September, so that's already 3 SEC games down so far in 2025 on this schedule. But Arkansas, you look at them here on September 13th. This is a game that probably should be a shootout. These are 2 really good offensive teams. Of course, Bobby Petrino calling plays as the offensive coordinator for the Razorbacks. But Arkansas is not going to have a defense that really can keep up with Ole Miss's offense. I think both defenses are actually going to struggle in this game, and I think it probably could be one of those high-scoring games. I don't think it's a pretty even matchup. I think Ole Miss is a slightly more talented team, but I do expect a close game, and I think it does come down to a late shootout, touchdown probably, and I do trust Ole Miss to get it done. And I do trust Lane Kiffin in shootouts more than Bobby Petrino, so I'm going to go with Ole Miss in this game. Again, a high-scoring game, but I got the Rebels beating Arkansas and improving to 3-0. And then they beat Tulane here on September 20th. But I don't really expect an easy win here for Ole Miss. I think this Tulane game probably is about a 2-touchdown probably win there for the Ole Miss Rebels against Tulane there on September 20th, and I think they improved to 4-0, even though it's going to be a close game. But then after that, they play LSU at home on September 27th. This is a big game here against the Tigers. LSU obviously going to be a really good team this year, possibly a top 10 team. I mean, you look at Garrett Nussmeier, a quarterback that had, he had his ups and downs last year, but he got really better as the season went along. So yeah, I do expect a high-scoring game in this one, but I think LSU's defense actually is going to probably slow this Ole Miss game, this Ole Miss offense down. LSU's got a type of offense that definitely can score, but their defense, I'm telling you, their defense could be a lot better compared to last year. They have so many playmakers on that defensive side of the football, and that probably could be the difference in this game. I know Ole Miss has got an offense that can score definitely against this defense, but maybe this is a game that's close in the first half, and then LSU tries to be fired up in the second half, and it probably is a game that does come down to the wire, but I do like this LSU team a lot, and I kind of do trust Brian Kelly that he'll get it done this year in 2025. But yeah, LSU, they may not be as good as we think they are going to be, but I think they're going to be really good this year. This is an LSU team that I think is very underrated, and this is a tough game to call, but I'm actually going to go with LSU to beat Ole Miss at their home place. I know I usually go with the home field advantage, but I'm not trying to really pick the, home team every time. But when it's like a 50-50 game, that's when it really gets tough for me. But this is an LSU team that's got talent on the roster, and then same thing for Ole Miss. And when it comes to like talented teams on the field, I got to choose the better team, and I'm going to go with LSU. Not saying they're the better team, but I think LSU is going to be a pretty good team this year in 2025. So that does give Ole Miss their first loss of the season. That puts them at 4-1. And then I got them beating Washington State after a bye week on October the 12th. Don't know how good the Cougars are because I don't really study them that much as I used to. So yeah, I think Ole Miss will not take care of business. It's probably similar to the Tulane game where they win by a couple of touchdowns. So that puts them at 5-1. Next, they play Georgia on the road on October 18th. Obviously, this will be a revenge game for Georgia, and I think they do get revenge on the Rebels this year. Georgia's going to have some question marks at quarterback with Gunnar Stockton. I know Ole Miss definitely has an offense that can score on this Georgia defense, but I think Georgia's going to return the favor from last year. Ole Miss's defense dominated Georgia's offense, and, Ole Miss's offense dominated Georgia's defense. I think it's the complete opposite. I think Georgia dominates on the defensive side of the football, and they also dominate on the offense, and I think running the football against this defensive line will be the difference. So I'm going to go with Georgia to get revenge here on the Rebels from last year. So that puts Ole Miss now at 5-2. But next week they play on the road at Oklahoma on October 25th. So how about this? Back-to-back road games with Georgia and Oklahoma, two very tough places to play against two, maybe the top two defenses in the SEC this year. Yeah, Oklahoma's also going to have a pretty good defense. They have a defense that is capable of stopping this Ole Miss offense. Brent Venables obviously knows how to get it done. On the defensive side of the football for Oklahoma, I mean, you look at this offense, they're not going to be very explosive, but this is a game that I think Oklahoma will probably run the football in against that defensive line, and you never know. After playing a physical Georgia team from last week, Ole Miss probably can come in a little bit sluggish. I wouldn't be surprised if they still did win, but I'm actually going to go with the upset here. I think Oklahoma beats Ole Miss here in a close game, but I think the Sooners definitely running the football is going to be probably the difference, and I think that's going to cost Ole Miss this game. So again, after a really bad beat up last week against Georgia, they come in the next week and they probably struggle even more, and they get all beat up again against Oklahoma here against a physical defense. And I'm going to actually go with Oklahoma. I really had a tough time with this prediction, but I'm going to go with the Sooners here to knock off Ole Miss, and that puts them at 5-3. So back-to-back losses there for the Rebels. Then they come back at home to play South Carolina on November 1st. How about these three games? Georgia, Oklahoma, and South Carolina 3 weeks in a row. That is kind of brutal because South Carolina is going to be a pretty good team this year as well. But it's at home for Ole Miss. I mean, I do expect another shootout here. I think Lenore Sellers is going to probably give the problems to the defensive line for Ole Miss in this game, but This is a tough one to call. It's definitely a 50-50 game. It's not really just like the LSU game. This is kind of a pretty even matchup in my opinion. So with that being said, I'm actually going to go with the home team here. And I think Ole Miss finally bounces back after 2 losses in a row. They beat South Carolina here in a shootout, close game. And I think Ole Miss is going to have a lot this year of shootouts. But I think they also take care of business against the Seidel. They improved to 7-3. And then they come back at home to play Florida on November 15th. This is also another team that's kind of similar to South Carolina. They're going to be a pretty good team. They're getting a lot of hype. Potentially could be a top 25 team. DJ Lagway is the quarterback that gave Ole Miss a lot of problems last year, and this is also the team that cost Ole Miss a spot in the playoff last season. So I think Ole Miss is going to come in here a little bit angry after losing that game last year. I think this will be a close game still. It probably will be a shootout here between these two teams. I think Lane Kiffin, though, has got a game plan for this one, and I think he does come in fired up a little bit as the coaching staff does. And I think Ole Miss does knock off Florida. I'm going to say it's a close game, but I got the Rebels getting revenge on Florida from last season. So that puts them at 8-3. And then their second bye week comes right before playing the Egg Bowl. They close things out with Mississippi State on November 29th. I don't really think this is going to be a close game whatsoever. Mississippi State obviously not going to be a really good team this year. So I think Ole Miss actually will take care of business. Not a blowout, but maybe by a couple of touchdowns or maybe like 17 points. Let's just put it that way. And I think Ole Miss is definitely clearly the better team. So I got Ole Miss finishing 9-3 in 2025. I mean, I think that's a pretty fair prediction. I mean, LSU, Georgia, and Oklahoma are not bad losses for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they probably did slip up somewhere else. Maybe they probably slip up against South Carolina or Florida, but maybe they slip up against either Arkansas or Kentucky. I mean, it's possible that Ole Miss could definitely take a bit of a step back from where they were last year. They could probably lose 4 games. It would not shock me if they did lose 4 games, but it would obviously be a disappointing year if they did go 7-5. But this is a team that I think is capable of going 10-2, but I'm going to go with 9-3. I don't really feel confident with this prediction, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So that's my prediction for Ole Miss for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And also give me your prediction for this Ole Miss team down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.